Yeah, Gary, many years ago, I suppose I'm giving my age up a little bit here, Dean, but it's probably 30 years ago. Gary used to be with a group of people that I sort of was involved with a hell of a lot, and Gary would walk into a room and he would just capture everybody's imagination. It's whether you knew him or not.
Yep.
He was just one of those guys that he loved life, and considering, you know, many of us complain about everything around us, he's a gentleman that really knows how to get on with it.
Right, this is part one of the Gary Wilson story.
The fabric of racing folklore is built on colourful characters and their stories. Men and women who capture the imagination of the public by overcoming adversity. One of the greatest examples is greyhound racing's Gary Wilson, who, after suffering debilitating injuries as a baby, rose to fame with his champion sprinter, Wooly Wilson.
I became disabled when I was at the age of 6 months old, when I choked on a dummy, a pacifier, and I must have inhaled it. And in those days, they didn't have the exterior ring that goes all over your face like they do today. I think they just had a little pin and just attach to your breast, and then that's what stopped you from swallowing it. But apparently, they must have come off the pin, and I must have been crying at the time, or trying to cry. And I inhaled the dummy, and it got lodged in my throat. And by the time they got me to the doctors, I was bleeding from my nose and my ears, and the doctor at the time tried to get it out, and he put his finger down my throat and pushed it down further. But anyway, fate has it that they finally cut it out with a knife. They cut through my throat and got it. But by then I was dead by about 2.5 minutes. And the doctor said to my mum and dad, if Gary lives, he's going to be no more than a vegetable. So yeah, maybe it's best if you pray that he dies. So they called mum and dad to come and say goodbye to me 3 times in a row, but I didn't die, you know. What a waste of petrol.
It didn't take long before the racing bug had bit, and Gary was swapping the school books for form guides.
I got a good education, and I did quite well at school until the age of about 14, until I got addicted to greyhound racing and the form guides, and then I used to bring the form guide along to school, and instead of doing my mathematics session, I'd be pulling out the form guide, working out 20 bucks at 6 to 4 and 40 bucks at 9 to 4, and the teacher sprung me a few times, and he said to me, Gary, it's either the form guide or the textbooks. And I said, well, you can shove the textbooks where the sun don't shine. That's what I said. So I left school, and I've been studying form ever since. And I was sitting on the sideline. I used to go to the rugby league every week because I was a Penrith Panther mascot. And I was sitting on the sideline and with Jeff Prenter, and he was backing loser after loser at the races. And I said, look, why don't you give up racing, backing racehorses? And I said, I'll give you a few tips at the dogs. Well, you wouldn't believe it. I gave him 3 tips that night for 3 winners. And then he's on the phone the following Monday and say, look, Gary, I reckon you're a real good judge of dog. Would you be interested in being a guest tipster for the Sun newspaper? I said, geez, I said, I'll give up the football for that. I said, that's great. So he put me on the payroll, and I got a huge $10 a week for doing the tips. But that didn't matter. I was as happy as a pig in mud. I picked 60 winners. And that was an average of five winners a night, and they were very impressed with my percentage.
Gary had formed other close relationships in the media, and it was through his association with the late Frank Kennedy that Gary owned his first 2 greyhounds.
I started racing a greyhound back in 1968 when I bought my first 2 dogs. In actual fact, I got them for $50 each. And Frank Kennedy, which is my dear friend from 70s. He virtually conned the owners of the pups from $400 down to $50 per pup. So I came away with a bargain. I came away with $800 worth of pups, but $100. And those pups turned out to be just super dogs. One was called Pace-O-Matic. He won 21 races plus 4 track records. And the other one was Top Streak. She won 29 races, and she won from 300 yards to 800 yards at Harold Park. So very versatile chasers indeed.
These first two ultimately led to Gary's champion, Wooly Wilson, the greyhound that was to change Gary's life. However, it almost didn't happen.
Actually, the true story behind Wooly Wilson is this, never been told before, is the fact that I bought Wooly Wilson's sister Holiday Magic prior to buying Wooly. And I brought her home, and she kicked up such a blues, she yapped and she barked and cried all night. My old man says, Gary, he said, either take that one back or go and buy a partner for it. And I said, well, Dad, I was going to buy another one as well to go with it, but I haven't got the money. And so Dad said, well, here's another $300, go and buy the other one. So I went back down in Chauncey's place, and luckily the one that I chose to go with Holiday Magic wasn't gone, which was Wooly Wilson. I chose him because he had a very thick woolly coat, and he had such a gentle nature. Even though he was only 6 weeks old, I thought this is the one for me. So I brought Wooly Wilson home the next day, and we reared them both in the backyard, and the rest is history.
One of the highlights of Gary's life came away from the racetrack. It was a tribute paid by his family and friends.
Gary Wilson, this is your life.
Can't believe it. Shortly after Wooly Wilson's success, I was surprised with being put on that show called This Is Your Life. That was possibly one of the highlights, or the highlight of my whole career. I couldn't believe it when they actually surprised me. Ray Warren rang me up and said, "Hey Gunner," he says, "can you get yourself down here?" He says, "We want to do a documentary on past greyhound champions." And he said that Wooly Wilson is one of those. So he says, "Yeah, can you just get yourself down?" So I said to I said, "Yeah, okay, Ray, I'll be down there. I'll get Dad to bring me down." So I got off the phone and said, "Hey Dad," I says, "can you take me down to Wentworth Park next Friday?" I said, I've got an interview to do with Ray Warren. His Dad said, "Listen, Gary," he said, "you're big noted yourself," and he said, "You made all the plans." He said, "You can get yourself down there." I thought, Jesus. I said, well, that's a pretty miserable attitude. But I didn't know that while I was catching the bus down from Cessnock to Sydney, my mum and Dad and all the family were getting their suits on and getting their hairs done and getting trimmed up for This Is Your Life. So all the way down I kept saying to the bus driver, "The miserable bastard, I can't understand why he had to catch a bus down instead of him taking me down." So as it turns out now, it was all for a reason. And This Is Your Life, This Is Your Life surprise was so much of a shock to me. I actually fell over during the first take of the surprise, and the cameraman had to do the take over again. He said to me, "Do you think you can do it again?" He said "Because you've fallen over halfway through with shock." I said, "Well, look, if you do it again right now, I'm still surprised. I'm certain," I said, "no one will even know."
The appearance on This Is Your Life produced a hidden talent.
My father taught me how to play the harmonica when I was only a youngster. I used to sit on the veranda at home and wait for the taxi to pick me up for school, and so I used to play the harmonica every morning just for something to do, and keep the cats away. I played the harmonica on This Is Your Life show, and I also had much enjoyment playing the harmonica with my dear friend Johnny Tapp. Johnny Tapp used to invite me to sporting nights at Auburn RSL and Canterbury Leagues Club and the Grafton RSL, you know, when they had the Calcutta up there every year. And Johnny Tapp would play the guitar or play the piano, and I would play the harmonica, and we'd just have a great time.
So what key, but?
Well, you've only got one key, gee.
It wasn't long before Gary's association with another of Australia's most colourful characters led to a regular spot on national television.
Yeah, John Singleton is one in a million as far as I'm concerned. But after the This Is Your Life show went to air, shortly after, he rang me up and said, you know, Gary, yeah, we'd like you to come on my Tonight Show, and just come on and play the harmonica and spin a yarn and just see how you go. So I went on there the first time, and I deliberately didn't bring my harmonica, so I'd have the excuse to come back again. And thankfully that worked, because I told a couple of yarns and me and John get on very well, and John invited me back and he said to me, Gary, he says, how would you like it, he said, if I got you on the show on a weekly segment? I said, I'd love it. He said, we'll even pay you. He said, nobody else on the show gets paid, but we'll pay you. So he paid me a couple of $100 a week, which is beautiful. And I used to get on the show, and we used to do a segment called Flog a Dog with Murray McCaskill. And we used to do another segment called Animal New Faces, where people would bring in their cockatoos and monkeys and dogs and horses and you name it. And they'd do tricks, and I'd be one of the judges. I'd be like a Jose Feliciano judge, because I can't see. So, but people, you know, enjoyed it, and that's what the name of the game is about, enjoying yourself.
Gary Wilson, this is your life. Can't believe it.
By the late 1970s, Gary Wilson's popularity away from the racetrack was at its peak. However, Gary would rarely miss a meeting, often being chauffeured to the track by the race callers. One of the drivers was the voice of greyhound racing, Paul Ambrosoli.
I used to go with Paul to the Doggers every Thursday and Wednesday at the Bull Eye and Dapto, and on the way home it was my job to wake him up at every set of lights that turned green. Like you'd pull up at the stoplights and they'd be red, and all of a sudden you'd see the eyes close like this. I'd say, all of a sudden they'd turn green, and I'd say, hey Paul, what? The lights have turned green. Oh, thanks Gary. And then I thought, oh no. So it was my job. I felt as if I had to keep talking non-stop and telling him yarns and jokes and making him answer me just to keep him awake, because I thought, oh, I'm not going to make it home.
Of course, Gary's also a very good storyteller. He likes to embellish them occasionally. He loves telling the story about the day he asked me if he could have a hot bath. And after I'd put him in the bath, the farrier came to my house, so momentarily I left Gary. The moment actually went for about 2 hours because I forgot all about him. And when I came back, I've got to tell you, he really was hot stuff. He was like a little red lobster in the bathtub. And he loves telling the story. Of course, I only remember it being about an hour that I left him in the bathtub, but Gary likes to tell people it was more like 5 or 6.
I can remember vividly, I went to his place for a week. He put me in the bath on a Sunday morning. He said, I'll put you in the bath. And so I was in the bath, and all of a sudden the front doorbell rang. And it was the man came to shoe his horses, and he must have forgotten all about me being in the bath, and I was forced to stay in the bath for 2.5 hours. And when he come to rescue me from the tub, I was like a shriveled up prune, not to mention frozen because the water was cold. I've had a wonderful association with people like Graham McNeath, Ray Conroy, Paul Ambrosoli, Johnny Tapp, Ian Craig. Yeah, they were so good to me throughout the years, and they all offered their hand in support and help throughout those years. I can remember, like, I think it would be about 1973 or 4. Graham McNeath used to carry me up to the broadcast box, and he'd have